Good evening, everyone. There's something unstoppable about a woman who reads, a woman who learns, a woman who walks into a room, not asking for permission, but knowing she belongs there. Read, learn, dominate. Three simple words. But together, they are a revolution. For generations, the world told women to shrink, to be quiet, to stay within lines drawn by someone else's pencil. But guess what? We're holding the pencil now. And we're not just writing our stories, we're rewriting the rules. Reading expands our minds. Learning sharpens our skills. And when we put that knowledge into action, we dominate, not with ego, but with purpose. Not with noise, but with undeniable presence. The truth is, smart women rule the world, not just because they can, but because they must. Because when women rise, families rise, communities rise. Entire nations transform. So, to every girl with a book in her hand and fire in her soul, don't wait to be chosen. Choose yourself. Read voraciously. Learn endlessly. Dominate fearlessly. This is your era. Own it. There's a reason the phrase, knowledge is power, has stood the test of time. It's because nothing is more liberating, more empowering, and more life-changing than what you put inside your mind. When a woman picks up a book, listens to a podcast, joins a course, or simply questions what she's told, she's not just consuming information, she's arming herself. Every piece of knowledge she gathers is a brick in the empire she's building. Because in a world that tries to distract, diminish, and derail women, knowledge is the ultimate act of rebellion. Smart women don't stumble into success by accident. They prepare, they research, they study the game before they play it. And when they walk into rooms, be it a boardroom, a classroom, or a courtroom, they come equipped. Their ideas are sharp because their minds are trained. Their presence is commanding because their intellect backs it up. And it's not just about formal education. Real knowledge comes from curiosity, from being hungry to know more than what's handed to you. We live in an era where information is everywhere. It's in your phone, in your feeds, in your pocket. But the difference between scrolling and learning is intentionality. A smart woman doesn't just consume, she absorbs, she reflects, and she questions. She's not afraid to unlearn what no longer serves her and relearn what the world refuses to teach. She studies history to shape the future, and she reads stories not just to escape, but to evolve. Knowledge doesn't just open doors, it breaks walls. It gives you language for your vision, statistics for your ideas, context for your strategy. It lets you walk into conversations that were never meant for you and own them like you created the table. That's the power of an informed woman. She's dangerous not because she's loud, but because she knows what she's talking about. And when you know better, you choose better, speak bolder, and lead smarter. So yes, knowledge is power, but for women, it's more than that. It's freedom. It's control over your own narrative. It's being able to navigate spaces that once excluded you and turning them into platforms that amplify you. A woman who knows grows, and a woman who grows, she becomes unstoppable. Not because she wants to win over the world, but because she has already conquered her mind. Confidence isn't something you wait to feel. It's something you choose to wear like armor, even on the days it feels heavy. A smart woman knows that brilliance without belief is like lightning in a bottle, useless unless released. Confidence is what gives knowledge its voice. You could be the most educated, most capable person in the room, but if you don't trust your own voice, the world won't either. That's why confidence isn't optional, it's non-negotiable. It's the power switch that turns potential into presence. What's misunderstood is that confidence doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean you have all the answers. It means you're not afraid to take up space while you figure things out. It means owning your flaws, your learning curves, your in-progress moments, and showing up anyway. Because when a woman stands tall in her truth, even with shaking hands or unfinished sentences, she commands attention not through perfection, but through authenticity. And that authenticity, it's magnetic, it's unforgettable. In a world that profits off women's insecurities, from beauty standards to imposter syndrome, confidence is an act of quiet rebellion. A confident woman doesn't ask if she's too much. She refuses to shrink to make others comfortable. She speaks without softening her tone. She negotiates without apology. She says no without needing a reason. That kind of energy makes people nervous. And that's exactly the point. Because confidence challenges the status quo, it disrupts expectations, it reclaims power. And here's the truth: confidence is contagious. When one woman owns her voice, she gives silent permission for another to do the same. You don't even have to know her name. Just watching her walk with her head held high, hearing her speak her mind without flinching, it ignites something in you. It whispers, if she can do it, so can I. That ripple effect is how movements start. Not with noise, but with presence. Not with followers, but with leaders who believe in their worth. But confidence doesn't come from waiting for someone to validate you. It comes from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and showing up like you already belong. Because you do. Confidence is what turns a woman's voice from a whisper into a force. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. And when a woman has that clarity, she doesn't ask the world for permission. She gives herself the green light and never looks back. The world wasn't designed with women in mind. Most of its systems, political, corporate, cultural, were built by men for men, often with women expected to play supporting roles. But that's changing. Smart women are no longer trying to fit into outdated molds. They're breaking them. They're not here to play the game by someone else's rules. They're rewriting the entire playbook, because true power doesn't come from adapting to the system. It comes from transforming it. For too long, ambition in women was labeled as aggression, confidence mistaken for arrogance, and leadership dismissed as being too much. But smart women don't dim their light to fit into small spaces. They're flipping the script. They're redefining what leadership looks like, what success means, and what it takes to get there. They're proving that compassion can coexist with power, that softness doesn't equal weakness, and that you can be nurturing and ruthless when it comes to your goals. These rewriting women don't wait for a seat at the table. They build their own. They create businesses with empathy, lead with emotional intelligence, and form communities where collaboration wins over competition. They show up as their full selves, unfiltered, multicultural, multidimensional, and refuse to compartmentalize their identities just to be accepted, because they know the future doesn't belong to those who conform. It belongs to those who disrupt. To rewrite the rules, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. You have to be okay with discomfort, criticism, and resistance. But smart women understand that legacy isn't built by being liked. It's built by being bold. Every time a woman chooses to question the norm instead of blindly following it, she shifts something for every girl watching. And that shift doesn't just break ceilings, it changes blueprints. It makes space for others to rise without needing to fit into a mold that was never made for them. This kind of disruption isn't loud for the sake of volume, it's strategic, it's purposeful. It's rooted in clarity, backed by knowledge, and driven by a deep desire for equity and impact. Whether in boardrooms, classrooms, or on global stages, smart women are redefining what power looks like on their own terms. They're done playing roles. They're writing new scripts, ones where their stories are centered, their voices are heard, and their brilliance is the norm, not the exception. In a world obsessed with titles, followers, and surface-level validation, smart women know the real flex is impact, not ego. They don't chase power for applause, they claim it to change lives. The smartest women in the room don't need to be the loudest, the most decorated, or the most praised. They know that ego seeks attention, but impact demands intention. It's the difference between being remembered for a moment and being remembered for a legacy. Ego says, "Look at me." Impact says, "Let me make something better." A woman driven by impact doesn't show up to impress. She shows up to shift, to build, to elevate. Her energy doesn't scream, it resonates. She doesn't have to prove she belongs. Her work speaks louder than any introduction. And that's what terrifies people. She leads with substance. She leads with results. And she leads with a purpose bigger than herself. Smart women don't hoard knowledge, they share it. They don't gatekeep opportunities, they create them for others. That's impact. They're not in competition with the next woman. They're lifting her while climbing themselves. Because real queens fix each other's crowns without announcing it. Their ego isn't fed by domination, it's quieted by contribution. Their leadership is rooted in, how can I help? Not, how do I win? And that kind of mindset, it transforms systems. Leading with impact means making hard choices. It means saying no to distractions that only feed the ego and yes to the work that serves a bigger vision. It means putting people before pride. And still, these women don't compromise their ambition, they refine it. Their success isn't about being seen at the top. It's about changing the view from the top for everyone. They don't lead for status, they lead for significance. Ego is fragile. It crumbles under criticism. But impact is resilient. It evolves. Smart women aren't afraid to admit mistakes, learn in public, or pivot when needed. They don't tie their identity to perfection. They tie it to purpose. And because of that, they build movements that last beyond their names. They're not here to be icons. They're here to be catalysts. And that's what truly powerful leadership looks like. Education is not just a tool, it's a weapon. A quiet, powerful weapon that has sparked revolutions, toppled systems, and rewritten futures. For women, education is more than access to information. It is access to freedom, to voice, to visibility. It challenges centuries of silence and pushes back against traditions that tried to keep them small. A smart woman knows when she educates herself, she doesn't just level the playing field, she builds a whole new game. It's no coincidence that the most oppressed communities are also the most undereducated, because ignorance breeds control. But education disrupts that cycle. It teaches a woman how to think critically, how to spot injustice, and how to rise against it. When a woman is educated, she becomes harder to silence and impossible to manipulate. She no longer depends on anyone to define her path. She becomes her own guide, her own map, her own compass. And education isn't limited to classrooms. It's in lived experiences, it's in mentorship, it's in conversations and books and mistakes. Smart women seek knowledge from everywhere because they know survival is instinct, but transformation is learned. They learn about finance so they can build wealth. They learn about law so they can defend their rights. They learn about technology so they're not just consumers, but creators. They learn not just to succeed, but to liberate others along the way. An educated woman doesn't just break barriers, she prevents them from being rebuilt. She passes her knowledge forward to her daughters, her sisters, her community. She becomes a living curriculum, teaching others that dignity, intelligence, and leadership are not male traits. They are human traits. And every time a woman speaks up in a meeting, starts a business, writes a policy, or challenges a norm, she's applying that education as resistance. She is proof that change starts in the mind and radiates outward. Smart women aren't just learners, they are unlearners. They strip away internalized limits, question inherited beliefs, and make space for truth. They understand that education isn't about perfection or prestige, it's about power. Not the kind that's worn like a crown, but the kind that's passed down like a torch. And with every book read, every skill mastered, every voice raised, they ignite a revolution not just in themselves, but in everyone watching. For generations, women's stories have been edited, diluted, or erased entirely. Their successes were downplayed, their pain silenced, their dreams boxed in. But that era is over. Smart women today are not waiting for permission to be seen or heard. They are owning their narratives with fierce clarity. They understand that the most powerful story you'll ever tell is the one you tell about yourself. Because if you don't define who you are, someone else will, and their version will never do you justice. Owning your narrative doesn't mean pretending to have it all figured out. It means standing in your truth, messy, unfinished, complicated, and saying, "This is me." It means refusing to be boxed into categories too bold, too emotional, too ambitious, too loud. Smart women know they can be all of it at once. They embrace every layer, every contradiction, every chapter of their story, not just the polished ones. Because power doesn't come from perfection. It comes from authenticity. The world will always try to tell women who they should be: soft enough to please, strong enough to survive, but never too much of either. But when a woman writes her own script, she stops playing roles that were never written for her in the first place. She becomes the author, the editor, the lead character. She decides how the story unfolds, and more importantly, she decides who gets access to it. That's not ego, it's self-respect. That's not arrogance, it's ownership. Owning your narrative also means telling your story in a way that empowers others to tell theirs. Because every time a woman speaks her truth, whether on a stage, in a post, or in a quiet conversation, she chips away at the shame that once kept women silent. She shows others that vulnerability is not weakness, and visibility is not vanity. It's impact, it's representation, and it matters deeply. When you tell your story boldly, you don't just honor your own voice, you give courage to every woman who still hasn't found hers. Smart women don't need fairy tales. They write real, raw, brilliant stories that carry weight. They know that their experiences, especially the difficult ones, are not liabilities but legacies in progress. They refuse to be footnotes in someone else's version of history. Instead, they take the pen back, reclaim the mic, and speak their truth with conviction. Not to prove anything, but to declare, "I am the author of my life, and this is only the beginning."